Is from John's Gospel, starting at verse 10. But I forgot what chapter.
Chapter 10, verse 1.
Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his feet follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the sheep and the flock scatters. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, while I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father." This is the word of the Lord.
Yes, we do have some. So Rosie and the Forster girls going with Amanda. Is that right? Yep, for Kids Church. Morning, everybody. Great to see you this morning. This morning I want to do something very simple and yet incredibly profound. Today I want to help us to meet Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth, the man who was born, some 2,000 years ago in a tiny hick town in the middle of nowhere. Also, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus the Son of God, the one who made the stars and who reigns over everyone and everything from the right hand of the Father. This Jesus, I want us to meet him. Now that might sound a little bit like wishful thinking, really, kind of a little bit hocus pocus. But I want to say if there is a God and if Jesus is who he says he is, then it's entirely normal and possible for us to meet Jesus. People have been doing it for 2,000 years. I've done it. Many people in this room have done it. We do it daily. And we do it by listening to his words in the Bible and meeting with him in prayer. Because he wants us to meet with him. This is what he wants. He wants a relationship. In the same way that you have a two-way relationship with your loved ones, Jesus wants that two-way relationship with us. And when you do meet with Jesus, it's often both comforting and confronting. He is not so meek and mild as to leave your life unchanged. When you meet Jesus, you find life that you weren't aware of before. You find love that fills your heart like no other love, and you find liberty that gives you a new lightness and joy in life. And so that's what we're looking at in these 3 weeks, the life, love and liberty that Jesus offers to those who meet him. Now, this is a great passage for us to look at, I think, because it really does help us get to know so much about Jesus. Jesus talks about himself very personally in this passage, because here he talks about himself as a shepherd. Now, I don't know if you know much about shepherds, but 2,000 years ago, shepherds had a deeply personal relationship with their sheep. And so here we find out not just kind of what Jesus does, but why he does it. We get a little glimpse into his heart, how he feels about us, about why he did what we celebrated at Easter. So very simply, today, 2 things I wanted us to do. I want us to think about what does it mean that Jesus is the good shepherd that he claims to be? What does that mean that he's the good shepherd? And then practically, what does it mean for us that Jesus is the good shepherd? Firstly, what does it mean that Jesus is the good shepherd? Now, we need to get a little bit of background here. When Jesus says he's the good shepherd, I don't know what comes to mind to you. It might come to mind a kind of warm, friendly, cuddly, kind of easygoing personality. That's not the picture, that's not the reality. Shepherds in Jesus were leaders. It was a picture of a leader. So the kings of the Old Testament were called shepherds of God's people. When Jesus makes this claim to be a shepherd, it's a not so subtle claim to be a leader and a king. That's what he's saying when he says he is the good shepherd. And so when Jesus says he is the good shepherd, he's taking some content straight out of the Old Testament. He didn't make this picture up himself. He's channeling the Old Testament, and he's making this immense claim here. So just listen to what it says in the Old Testament about shepherds. This is God speaking against the bad shepherds in Ezekiel's day, in the prophet Ezekiel's day. This is kind of a summary that I've taken from Ezekiel 34. This is what the sovereign Lord says to the shepherds who take care of themselves and not the flock. Because my flock lacks a shepherd, I am against these shepherds and will remove them. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. I will rescue them. I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them. I will tend them. I will bind up the injured. I will shepherd the sheep. God says that. And so when Jesus comes along and says, I am the good shepherd, you can see what a big claim he's making here. He is God in the flesh, come to shepherd his people, to lead them, to be their king. Now that is a huge claim, and the people who are listening to him get it. They understand that this is a big claim. You can tell that because if you skip forward to the end of the chapter, they pick up stones to try to kill him because that's too big a claim. All right? Blasphemy, they say. They realise he's claiming to be God. Now, I think this is just helpful for us because there's kind of this rumour going around that, Jesus was just a humble teacher, kind of nomadic, didn't want to make a big deal of himself, and it's the church that's made a big deal of Jesus. And they've kind of exploded this picture of him that's not true. I say that is not true at all. Jesus made a big deal of himself. We haven't exaggerated his claims. Those in Jesus' day knew what he is claiming. That's why they wanted to kill him. He knew what he was saying. He was saying he's at the centre of the universe. Now, if you're just getting to really meet Jesus personally, I want to let you in on a couple of things that is helpful to know as you get to understand him better. You know how they say it's dangerous to meet your idol because you're only going to be disappointed, right? Because they always end up being smaller than they are in your imagination and not as impressive and a bit of a disappointment. It's kind of the opposite with Jesus when you really meet him. It's very much the opposite. It's kind of dangerous to meet with Jesus because he so far exceeds your expectations. You might be wanting your life to get a little bit better. Actually, he kind of blows your life apart and changes it completely. As you get to know him, he gets bigger, more impressive, more powerful. Right? He's not like anyone else you've ever met. So he gives this illustration and he calls himself not only the shepherd but the gate. It's another agricultural metaphor here. So have a look at verses 9 and 10 in your Bible if you've got it there. He says, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Is an incredible claim that he makes here. I mean, in a minute he's going to talk about being the shepherd, but first he says, I am the gate. In other words, I am the way in. I am crucial and essential and vital. And if you want to get in, if you want to find pasture, if you want to find life, you have to come through me. That's what Jesus is saying. If you want that meaningful relationship with God, it's through me. Now, who says stuff like that? Who's not, like, insane? Like, who says, I mean, imagine if I said to you, look, you're very lucky to be here today because I am the gate to God. Like, you would laugh, you'd walk out, right? I'm not saying that, okay? If I came to you and said, this is who I am, you think that is ridiculous. No one says that. No one says that at all. Except Jesus does. He says in John chapter 5, I am your maker and your judge. No one else says, as Jesus does, I am the bread of life. You cannot be satisfied, that is. You can't be satisfied, spiritually satisfied, eternally satisfied without me. It's a big claim. That's what he says. No one else says, as he does in John chapter 8, I am the light of the world. That is, you can't see properly without me. Without me, you're in darkness. Can't understand what's true spiritually without me. No one else says what he says in John 11, I am the resurrection and the life. You don't have a future unless you take me seriously, he says. Right? Nobody talks like this. It's an immense claim that he makes. It's only Jesus who places himself at the centre of life and creation and says, it's all about me. That's kind of one side of him, but on the other side, he is also at the same time completely humble. He's not like anyone else you've ever met. It's all about me, and I am going to wash your feet. He says, I am the centre of all that is, and I am going to spend my time with the social outcasts that nobody wants. He heals the sick. He loves those who nobody loves. He is unashamedly self-promoting and unashamedly humble. When you meet Jesus, when you really get to know him, he gets bigger, more impressive. The other thing that happens when you really meet Jesus is you look back on your life without him and you kind of wonder how you actually lived it. It looks shallow. You look back and you say, how could I have ever thought that those things that I was trying to find meaning and purpose in would actually give it to me? They can't. A fit body, how can that satisfy me like knowing the creator of the universe who loves me? Owning property, how does that give me any kind of security in comparison with the security that I have in Christ? Whatever it is, whatever superficial pleasure, whatever it is, how can that give me the deep peace and satisfaction that I find in Jesus, right? C.S. Lewis says we get caught up in enjoying the good gifts of God, all the stuff around us, and then we forget the giver. We play with the toy but neglect the relationship. We mess around in a muddy puddle when all the while The ocean is just over the hill. Just shallow stuff, right? Because nothing comes close to offering the depth of life, true life, deep life, meaningful life that Jesus does. He says he's the gate. Okay, so when we meet Jesus, we're meeting the historical, human, divine, and unique person. He's the life giver. But not only that, he says he's the gate, he also says he's the shepherd. Now I want to say, well, what does this teach us about him? Firstly, it shows us that Jesus knows his sheep. He says in verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. Shepherds in those days, you've got to remember, they're different to Western shepherds or Western farmers. We don't really have shepherds, do we? They knew their sheep in quite an amazing way. All the commentaries talk about how shepherds in ancient times knew their sheep. They could spot their sheep a mile off. That's because they didn't have thousands, right? They had their flock that they took care of all the time. 24/7, 365, they were with their sheep. They famously smelt like their sheep because they were with them all the time, right? Their life was bound up with the lives of their sheep. So Jesus is like an ancient shepherd in this way, more than your usual shepherd, because he knows them so well, even more than an ancient shepherd, really, because he names them. He knows them by name. I read some commentaries that suggest, maybe there's ancient shepherds did actually kind of give their sheep nicknames. I'm not so convinced about that. Like here's Snowy and there's Whitey and Blizzard. I don't know if they really did that. More of the commentaries say Jesus is actually making a contrasting point here. Unlike other shepherds who cannot identify their sheep, Jesus doesn't just identify, he names us. He gives them a name. He knows them personally. It's a powerful thing to name someone. You get that privilege when you have children. Jesus takes that privilege when he names Simon Peter, because he has a new purpose in his life to proclaim the Messiah to the world. Or think of Abram, who God renames Abraham because he will now be the father of many nations. Right? When you name someone, you give them dignity, you give them purpose, identity, significance. And Jesus knows your name. He knows you personally. He knows you by name and he calls you by name. So he knows his sheep. Secondly, we see that Jesus is the kind of shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. So verse 10, he says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. This is interesting because I think this is the exact opposite of what most Westerners think, right? I think most people think, if I'm going to have life to the full, then I need to get away from Jesus. If I get to Christ, then my life will be ruined. Jesus says, if you want to get away from me, then your life will be ruined. If you come to me, then you'll have life to the full. What does he mean by that when he says life to the full? I don't think Jesus is saying, come to me and you'll have an easy, happy, healthy, wealthy, wise life. It'll just be peaches. He's not saying that. When he offers us life and life to the full, he's offering us new life. Life with access to the source of life. And he explains how he does that in the very next verse. He says, verse 11, I am the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Verse 10, I've come to give you life. Verse 11, I've come to give me death. Verse 10, he gives us life. Verse 11, he takes death. Life for you, death for me. Why? Because he's the good shepherd. He says it again in verses 17 and 18, I lay down my life and I take it up again. It's an incredible thing to say. It's one thing to give up your life, right? You can do that. You can do that. People do it in war. Lots of contexts where people give up their lives. It's one thing to lose your life, but it's another thing to take it up again. It's another thing that people don't. It's just Jesus is different, right? He says he has the authority, the power to take it up again. This is a powerful proof of Easter, right? If Jesus had gone around saying this and then never risen, I don't think anyone would have paid much attention to him. But this is the kind of authority he has. He says he receives the command from his Father and he does it. He lays down his life and he takes it up again in order to save his sheep. So we're getting a bit of a picture of what Jesus is like. He's come to be a king, a good shepherd, a shepherd who's willing to lay down his life for his sheep because he knows them by name and he's calling them to himself. So what does that mean for us? I think it means that we need Jesus like sheep need a shepherd. I think that's pretty obvious there, isn't it? Kind of what it's saying there. We need Jesus like sheep need a shepherd. Now, why do sheep need a shepherd? The answer is not complimentary. Just fair warning. A shepherd needs to be constantly vigilant because sheep are well known to be hopeless, just useless creatures by themselves. They are totally defenceless. If they're left to themselves, they wander off, they get lost. They can't defend themselves, they're not quick, they're not nimble, they have basically nothing going for them to survive on their own. They are slow compared to other animals, they're not that smart. Right? You've never seen a flock of wild sheep that don't do that. They need constant care, protection. And Jesus is making the point here. He's saying, you and I, not complimentary, are like that. We are totally spiritually dependent. We need a shepherd. We need guidance. Now, maybe not, but I just want to say, just think of yourself 10 years ago. Think of some of the decisions that you made 10 years ago. And you can do this back when you're 15, think about when you're 12, and when you're 20, think about when you're 15. Think about the decisions that you made, your past self made. Now, if you're anything like me, you look back at that past self and you say, you're an idiot. You would like, what? Why did you do those things? Seriously. Why did you not see that you should have bought a house then? Because now you can't. Fool. Right? And this goes on. You kind of look back and you go, gee, I really messed that up. I should have done something different there. Now, the thing is, we look back in the past, what's happening now, right? We think, oh no, I was an idiot, but now I'm starting to get things together. What's going to happen in 10 years' time when you look back on yourself now? We think we're just getting over it, but we are sheep. Not only do we get lost, we think that we can find our way back. Apparently, often when sheep get lost and then found, they don't just kind of come willingly, they actually run around like idiots again. They try to get away, further lost. Recently, our family has been watching the ABC show Muster Dogs. I don't know if you've watched that. Cute little litter of Kelpie pups that get handed out to farmers all around the country to see if they can train them up to be really good muster dogs in just 1 year. It's a bit of a not social, but an experiment. Cute dogs. Our family loves it. Why do they need these specially bred and trained dogs in order to shepherd the sheep, to round them up, to get them to where they want to go? Because the sheep won't listen to the farmer. They never go. They just want to go in all different directions. And so you need these dogs that are constantly moving back and forth to keep them together. You and I always need a guide. And we always need someone to help us and protect us because we are spiritually dependent, so says Jesus, and we often don't realise it. Because without a shepherd to lead us, we are subject to whatever whim our hearts desire. Right? Sin reigns our hearts. This is true of people generally, and it's true specifically of you as well. Jesus knows just how much of a sheep you are, I am. Remember, he calls us by name. He knows the depth of our sheepness. And so we need Jesus like a sheep needs a shepherd. Second thing it means for us is, I think, an important point, and that is that Jesus values us, that we are valuable to him, even to the point of giving his life for us. So again, he says in verse 11, I am the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. We know that sheep, we've established this, are very stupid animals. But the other thing is that sheep were also very valuable animals. That's why it was not that unusual for the shepherd who had 99 to go after the one that was lost. They're very valuable, right? The wool generated income, as well as their hide, as well as their meat, very valuable animals. A shepherd didn't have his money, his wealth, stored in a bank, and then it was his job to look after the sheep. The sheep were his treasure. They were all he had. They were his wealth, his treasure. And Jesus compares himself with the hired hand, right, who looks after the sheep, but they only do it because they're in it for the money, for something else. But not me, says Jesus. He's in it for us. Now, there is something surprising here because I don't know if you've got a pet. I mean, a few people obviously have pets. I have a pet dog, and I love her, right? But I'm not going to lay down my life for her. If she runs out in front of a car on the road, I am not running after her. As much as we love her, as sad as that would be, I'm just not going to do that. But Jesus says, I love my sheep so much that when the wolves come, I'm willing to become a lamb myself. That's what he's saying. I lay down my life for the sheep in the place of the sheep. He is the shepherd who becomes the sacrificial lamb. I'm the shepherd that when the wolf comes, I would lose anything rather than see my sheep die. I would lose my life. I would lose my glory. I would lose anything rather than that. That is how valuable you are to him. And so you see what it means here for us, right? When Jesus says, he's the shepherd, we're the sheep. On the one hand, it's very insulting. Not shying away from that. It's very insulting, completely dependent. We get lost. We don't know the way home. Hopeless, defenseless, very insulting. But on the other hand, when he says, I'm the shepherd and you are the sheep, he's saying, you are my treasure. We've already heard Jesus say that he is the centre of everything, the centre of the universe. Everything belongs to him, right? And yet he says, I've bound my heart to you. I'm ready to lay down my life for you, to die. I did die for you. And if I died for you, I will never abandon you. He's the good shepherd. And I think what that means for us is when you hear that, when you really meet him, you hear his voice and you respond. There are two ways to shepherd sheep. There's the modern Western way that I've already touched on, where you have, dogs and motorbikes and helicopters and, all these things. And then there's the Middle Eastern way. Western farmers drive their sheep from behind to get them to go where they want. That's what the dogs are doing there. They're driving them from behind. Middle Eastern shepherds stand in front and call their sheep onward. They call their sheep to follow them. Middle Eastern shepherds had this deep relationship with their sheep because they spent their lives with them. And the shepherd relied on the sheep to listen to them and follow them. There's a story of a shepherd in Palestine just after World War I. At night while he was asleep, some soldiers came and were stealing the flock, hungry soldiers, not surprising. They were stealing his flock away as quietly as they could. Shepherd awoke to find the soldiers down in the valley. He was up on the ridge, down on the valley, taking his sheep away. There was a bunch of them. He was just on his own. They're much stronger than him. What could he do? They were already, down in the valley. He did the one thing he could do. He walked to a high spot where he could see the sheep and the sheep could see him. And he called out to them using the call that he'd used every day of their life. The call that meant to them, come and find food, come and find pasture, come and find water, come and find safety. And in the gathering light, he called out a first time and the sheep stopped. He called out a second time and the sheep turned around and saw him at the top of the ridge. And he called a third time and they ran to him. The soldiers could do nothing. They pushed right past them in order to get back to the shepherd because they heard his voice and they knew it. And they knew that his voice meant safety, it meant pasture, it meant life. The sheep know the shepherd's voice. And so I want to say to us this morning, are you hearing the shepherd's call? He offers you life. He laid down his life in order to give you life, life to the full. He calls you to listen to him. Will you run to him? I want to finish up by reading a psalm. I think it's the most famous psalm, which talks about us as sheep and Jesus as our God as our shepherd. I want you to notice what happens in the psalm, though, as I read it, because as you read this psalm, in the middle of it, there's a change that happens, a transition that happens, where the writer changes from being a sheep to being a friend welcomed at the table. Because Jesus doesn't want just strict obedience. He wants this two-way relationship. He wants us to meet him personally. He wants fellowship, communion with him. So this is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Jesus Christ wants us to meet with him, to listen to him, to follow him. And when you do, he leads you into pasture and quiet waters, and he gives you life, life to the full. Amen. We're going to celebrate that life that we have.